Evolution and the Foundations of Biology. We've got a whole stack of sources here, classic texts, brand new papers. And the mission? Well, it's to help you grasp these key concepts, the ones that explain everything, really.
Yeah.
From a single cell right up to the amazing diversity of life. No information overload, just clarity, the core ideas.
Exactly. And what's so cool is how these ideas, I mean, some are centuries old, right? They're still evolving themselves. We get this deeper, more comprehensive picture of biology all the time. So today, we're not just asking what these principles are, but really why they matter. To understanding life, ourselves, even our health, you'll start to see how it's all connected. It's quite beautiful, actually.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with maybe the big picture. Our sources talk about these 5 core themes that sort of tie all of biology together. Think of them like pillars holding up, well, everything we know about life. First one, maybe the biggest, evolution as the unifying principle. It's not just, species changing. It explains why life is so similar in some ways that share DNA, those conserved proteins, the unity, and also why it's so incredibly different, the sheer diversity. It connects it all.
Yeah.
And it's not just theory, right? Medicine depends on it.
Oh, absolutely. Massively. Understanding how, say, pathogens evolve helps us design better antibiotics, better vaccines. We're in this constant evolutionary race with them. And even understanding genetic diseases, seeing their evolutionary roots can point towards new therapies. It's fundamental. Not ancient history. It's happening right now.
That's powerful. Evolution's constant pressure. Makes you think. Which leads nicely to the second theme, the link between structure and function. This one feels kind of obvious, doesn't it? The shape of something tells you what it does. Like a wrench is shaped to turn a bolt.
Exactly. It's intuitive, but biology perfects it. The sources mention red blood cells. That biconcave shape, it's not just random. It maximizes surface area for gas exchange, makes them flexible to squeeze through tiny vessels. It's perfectly optimized for carrying oxygen. Form follows function everywhere in biology, molecule, organ, everything.
Okay, number 3, information flow. This is like life's operating system, the instructions. How genetic information gets stored, copied, and then, used. DNA, RNA, proteins, the big 3.
Right. And the key question is, how does that library of information in the DNA, the A's, T's, C's, and G's, how does it actually do anything? Well, it gets transcribed into RNA, slightly different letters. U replaces T. Then that RNA gets translated into proteins. And proteins, they're the workhorses. They build things, they make reactions happen, and it's all incredibly controlled, even by things outside the main sequence, like epigenetics or these little regulatory RNA bits.
Right. Okay, theme 4. Energy and matter transformations. Life needs fuel. It's not running on magic. Constantly taking in energy, sunlight, food, and rearranging matter. Building, maintaining, powering up.
Precisely. Organisms are basically fighting disorder, the second law of thermodynamics. They maintain their structure by constantly processing energy. And the key molecule here is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Think of it like the cell's rechargeable battery. It captures energy from reactions that release it and spends it on reactions that need it. Without ATP cycling, everything just stops.
Okay, and the last one. This is where it gets really mind-bending for me. Systems interactions, leading to emergent properties. It's not just about the parts. It's about what happens when they work together. New things emerge that the parts alone couldn't do.
Exactly. You see it everywhere. Like individual fat molecules, phospholipids. Not much on their own, but together they form a cell membrane. That's emergence. Or think about heart cells. One cell just twitches. But get enough together, synchronized, you get a heartbeat, a totally new property. And it scales up. Neurons interacting create thought. Organisms interacting create ecosystems. These emergent properties, they're what make life so complex and, frankly, amazing. It's way more than just the sum of its parts.
So those are the 5 pillars. With that framework, let's really dig into the cornerstone, evolution. Okay, let's unpack this. The story usually starts with Darwin, right? 1859. Natural selection.
Darwin, yes, and Alfred Russel Wallace, too. They both independently figured out this core idea. Basically, individuals with traits that help them survive and reproduce tend to leave more offspring. So those helpful, heritable traits spread, adaptation. But the picture got much clearer later, in the 1930s, 40s, when they merged Darwin's ideas with genetics, Mendel's work on inheritance, that's the modern synthesis. It defined evolution in genetic terms. A change in allele frequencies in a population over generations, how common different gene versions become.
Got it. A change in the gene pool over time. But, for someone listening, the big question might be, how do we actually know evolution happens? What's the proof?
Excellent question. And the evidence is overwhelming, coming from lots of different fields. First, fossils. They show us sequences of change over time. Like whale evolution is amazing, clear steps from land mammals back to the water. Then there's homology, similar structures in different species because they share an ancestor. Think of the bones in your arm, a bat's wing, a whale's flipper. Same basic blueprint, modified. And molecular biology is huge now. We see incredible similarities in DNA and proteins across different life forms. Things like cytochrome C for energy, or Hox genes that map out the body plan. They're found everywhere, showing deep shared ancestry. And finally, biogeography, where species live. Darwin's finches on the Galapagos, each island having slightly different birds, or why marsupials are mostly in Australia. It reflects isolation and adaptation to local conditions.
Wow. Yeah, when you line it all up like that, it's compelling. But you mentioned earlier that ideas evolve too. And evolution itself isn't static. Our sources talk about this newer idea, the extended evolutionary synthesis, or EES. It sounds like it adds some really interesting new layers, maybe even changes how we think about inheritance.
It really does. The EES doesn't replace Darwin, but it expands the framework. It brings in factors that the modern synthesis didn't emphasize as much, like epigenetics. These are changes in how genes are used, not changes to the DNA code itself, things like methylation. And these changes can sometimes be inherited. So you might inherit a tendency based on how your parents' genes were marked by their environment, not just the genes themselves. Then there's developmental plasticity, the idea that the same genes can lead to different physical traits depending on the environment during development. It's like the environment helps shape the final outcome from the genetic blueprint. And niche construction, this is fascinating. Organisms aren't just passive responders to their environment. They actively change it. Beavers build dams, earthworms change soil, and those changes then alter the selection pressures on themselves and other species. It's a feedback loop. They're co-directing their own evolution in a way.
Whoa, okay. So organisms shape their world, and that shapes them back. And inheritance isn't just about the DNA sequence. That's a lot to take in. And you mentioned development. There's Evo-Devo too, right? Evolutionary developmental biology.
Yes, Evo-Devo. It's all about how changes in development drive evolution. It turns out that small tweaks to really important toolkit genes, those Hox genes again, or PAX6 for eyes, these master control genes, tiny changes in when or where they're turned on can lead to huge differences in the final organism. It shows how diversity can arise efficiently by tinkering with the control switches of development using largely the same set of basic parts.
Incredible. The efficiency is just stunning.
Oh.
Okay, so we have this richer picture of evolution. Let's zoom back in on that information flow pillar. How does it actually work at the molecular level, DNA to protein?
Right, the basics, DNA, the double helix, A with T, C with G, the master blueprint, RNA, usually single-stranded, U instead of T. It's the messenger, the builder, the regulator, very versatile. mRNA carries the code, RNA makes ribosomes, tRNA brings the amino acids.
And it all follows the central dogma, mostly.
Mostly, yes. Crick's idea. DNA gets transcribed to RNA, RNA gets translated to protein, that's the main flow. But biology loves exceptions, like retroviruses making DNA from RNA using reverse transcriptase. So the dogma is central, but not absolute. Life finds ways.
And it's not just a simple assembly line, right? You mentioned regulation. And where does the variation, the stuff evolution acts on, come from?
Absolutely. Regulation is key. We have those epigenetic marks, methylation, histone changes acting like dimmer switches on genes, often reversible, influenced by environment, sometimes heritable, plus lots of non-coding RNAs, like microRNAs that fine-tune gene expression. It's incredibly complex. As for variation, the ultimate source is mutation, random changes in DNA. But then recombination shuffles the genetic deck during sex. Gene duplication can create extra copies that are free to evolve new functions. And in bacteria especially, horizontal gene transfer is massive swapping genes directly between cells. That's how antibiotic resistance spreads so fast.
Okay, so variation happens, information flows, structures are built, and all of this needs energy, constantly, fighting that slide into disorder with the second law.
Exactly. Organisms are open systems, constantly importing energy to maintain order. That's metabolism. You have catabolic pathways breaking things down, like burning glucose in cellular respiration to release energy, and anabolic pathways using that energy to build things up, making proteins, DNA, cell walls. And connecting them is ATP, that energy currency. Breaking ATP's phosphate bond releases a handy packet of energy to power the anabolic, building reactions. It couples everything together.
Right. It connects the energy release to the energy need. Okay, bringing it all together. We're moving beyond just looking at parts in isolation. Reductionism. Our sources really emphasize this shift towards systems biology, looking at the whole network.
Yes, reductionism is vital. You need to know what the parts do. But systems biology tries to understand how they interact, the network. It uses computational models, huge data sets, genomics, proteomics to map out signaling pathways, metabolic networks. The goal is to understand and predict those emergent properties we talked about. How does a drug affect the whole cell network? How does a disease progress through interacting pathways? It's about understanding the dynamics, the behavior of the whole system, seeing the concert, not just hearing the individual notes.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground. Evolution, information, energy systems. Why does all this deep biology matter to, someone listening right now? Why care about ATP or allele frequencies? Our sources point to some really direct medical relevance, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not abstract. Think about antibiotic resistance. That's evolution happening on a timescale we can see, driven by our use of antibiotics. Understanding the mechanisms, mutation, horizontal gene transfer, selection is critical for finding new ways to fight infections. Or cancer. We can view cancer as evolution happening inside the body. Cells mutate, gain advantages in growth and survival, outcompete their neighbors. It's clonal evolution. Understanding that helps develop targeted therapies. And think about human variation, like the sickle cell allele, HBS. Having one copy protects against malaria, a huge advantage in some parts of the world. That's heterozygote advantage, an evolutionary trade-off with real health consequences. And finally, there's this really interesting idea called mismatch theory. The basic idea is that our bodies evolved adaptations for a hunter-gatherer lifestyle over millions of years. But our modern environment, diet, activity levels, stresses is totally different. So some of those old adaptations might actually cause problems now, contributing to things like obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease. Our genes are mismatched to our current lives.
Wow. Okay, that really brings it home. What an incredible journey we've taken. From evolution shaping unity and diversity, through the nuts and bolts of information and energy, to how complexity emerges from simple parts working together, and seeing how it all connects directly to our health, our diseases, our future. So what does this all mean for you? Well, it means understanding biology isn't just, for lab coats. It's fundamental to understanding ourselves in this amazing, complex world we live in.
And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. As we get better and better at understanding these fundamental processes, epigenetics, systems biology, gene editing even, how might our ability to actually influence these core mechanisms change things? How might it change our future, our health, maybe even how we define life itself? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Well, we hope this deep dive sparked some connections and gave you some real food for thought. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.